Hello, my name is Federico Pozzer and I'm a PhD student at the University of Leeds in the UK. The title of my talk is Breath as Musical Regulator in Composition and Performance. Firstly, I'm going to talk shortly about the topic of breathing, what breathing means within my research, and why I became interested in that. Then I'll focus on a few compositions of mine in order to outline the development and the targets of my research. So from the beginning of my compositional project, central to my practice was the fact that players' breathing is used as time regulator. Within my work, I used performers' breathing as a tool to determine the duration of a sound or as a segment of time in which musicians have to play one or set of sounds. I'm currently using breathing as an instrument to foster different types of interaction between two or more agents, between players or between performer and score. But in every case, the constraints on players' breathing imposed by the score aim to shape the temporal dimension of the musical piece, altering the duration of the single action, the sequence of the musical events, and the entire length of the composition. I believe that it is worth mentioning that since the beginning of this project, what interested me in this compositional strategy was the fact that musicians are brought to act and react in unexpected and indeterminate ways, so that the musical result, including combinations of sounds and musical actions, and temporal elements as well, are not under my control as composer, but rather they change according to the differences in players' breathing. What I aim for is to use constraints on breathing to generate unpredictable and indeterminate situations. Just to clarify, my practice does not involve a virtuosic approach on the instrument. My intent is not to explore the sonic features of breathing, but rather to make players be aware of their own breathing, to make them act and interact and listen in unfamiliar ways. My practice is particularly tied to those composers and musicians who use breathing in unconventional ways, including Charles Drolig, flutist Catherine Williams, Adam Overton, and Pauline Oliveros. In this respect, I think that for clarifying some aspects of my musical practice, it might be useful to take a look at what Oliveros said about breathing. So for the people who does not know Oliveros, she was a composer who worked a lot with meditative techniques involving breathing in her pieces, particularly in her series called Sonic Meditations, but also in other compositions of her. So Oliveros claims that by trying to observe the breath cycle without disturbing it, one begins to tune an activity which is both conscious and unconscious. In short, breath is the door to the unconscious, where a great store of energy lies, ready to support or obliterate conscious efforts. For me, the observation that Oliveros points out is quite useful to understand the potential of using breathing within a musical context, specifically in terms of intention, choices, and decision-making. She highlights the fact that breathing is both an intentional and unintentional activity. We can of course control our breathing, but we can also adhere to it and act according to it without imposing our will. Now I'm going to show you a set of pieces of mine that emerged from this research. For each piece, I will firstly outline the constraints on breathing imposed by the score, and then I will provide the results through audio and video recordings, photos, and players' feedback. I'd like to point out that central to my research is the way players behave in the conditions fostered by the instructions of the score. A special focus on the experience that performers have during the process has been helpful in order to highlight the experimental aspects of my practice and also to offer alternative perspectives on the way players experience the piece and the constraints on their breathing. So in this piece, Meetings, for violin, guitar and piano, breathing is used as time regulator and tool to foster interaction between players. Musicians are asked to engage with their breathing in 3 different ways, depending on the different sections of the score. In some circumstances, they play and breathe autonomously, and in others, they are asked to lead the other musicians using their breathing, and in other as well, they play according to another player's breath. Each musician plays following a given major scale: violin D major, guitar B flat major, and piano G flat major. They can play from 1 up to 3 notes at each exhalation, depending on their choices or on what the other musicians play. That depends on the cases, the sections of the score. So the musical result was interesting, particularly from a temporal point of view. For instance, when they are all asked to follow their own breathing, musicians play kind of regularly, not particularly slow, but following a certain pace. Now I want to play an audio recording so you can get a clearer idea of what I mean. So in this one you just heard, musicians are playing and breathing autonomously, while in the next one, the guitar player is asked to lead the others using his breathing. And you'll probably hear that the musician who leads tend to breathe more slowly in order to make clear to the others when he's exhaling. Breathing is not audible, but you can hear this because it affects the timing of the piece, the sequence of the different musical actions of the musicians. So as you could probably hear, these constraints considerably affect the temporal dimension of the piece, and rather stimulating were also players' feedback. For instance, the guitar player claims that he was rather more focused when he was following his own breathing, whereas he lost attention when he had to follow or lead the others. On the other hand, the violinist claimed that although the simple musical material, the various tasks required by the score, and the way playing should be matched to breathing make the piece very demanding, pushing her to be constantly focused and attentive. The next piece I'm going to show you is called Turning Pages for flute. In this piece, the score consists of 9 single sheet papers arranged following a random order on a folding music stand. The sheets are approximately 1.5 centimeters apart, and in each sheet, an action that the player should perform is indicated. It can be a multiphonic, a jet whistle, or a normal note, or also an action that does not require the use of the flute, for instance, just exhaling through the mouth or whistling. The fact is that the flutist should perform the action indicated in the page while blowing on the sheet. Just when the sheet has fallen down, the flutist can read the following action and perform it. So here's an extract of the recording. So the result seems to confirm that constraints on breathing affect the length of the singular musical event, of the sequence of the events, and of the entire piece. Furthermore, dynamics, in this case, dynamics may also depend on these constraints. In fact, the amount of air needed to make the sheet fall down might alter the volume, the dynamics of the musical action. The theatrical dimension is due to the fact that, as one of the players that performed the piece claimed, the performer, the flutist, is constantly looking for the right spot on the sheet to blow on it and make it fall down. Interestingly, he also claimed that before performing it, the piece seemed easy and almost banal, but while he was playing, he realized it was actually not. Here are some pictures. For example, on the left, the flutist is playing a jet whistle, and that's why he's in this position. On the right side, it's one of the first versions. The flutist is seated, and the score is on a kind of table. And here on the left, down, in the middle, actually I'm whistling, because one of the constraints was whistling, adding a little bit of air to make the sheet fall down. So to conclude, I'm working now on a series of text scores that stimulate the intersubjective dimension, the engagement between performers, so with the audience, and with the performance space. It's a series of text scores open to professional and non-professional performers. Some of them involve the use of musical instruments, while others require just the use of players' breath. As they are kind of flexible and adaptable to a vast range of musical situations, what I would like to do with these pieces is to try them within workshops, in conservatories or music schools, experimenting with music students with different types of instruments, including wind instruments, singers, but also instruments that do not require the use of breath to produce sounds. So I'm now, in this period, I'm in contact with some universities and conservatories in Italy and also in the UK to arrange some dates for next year. I think that this would be quite useful to see the different results that might arise depending on the different conditions and also the amount of people. Thank you.